G'day all, good morning. Hope you're doing well. Trust you had a good week, or at least better than mediocre. So good to hear that Auntie Gladys is giving back some of our freedoms and we are able to get more mobile out of our home. So thanks, Auntie Gladys. Anyway, jokes, moving on. Our time together today is going to be quite brief. So yeah, no 40 minute presentation today, so fist bump for that one. So that's good, I suppose, for me and also for you. Yeah, we're making room for a We Are the Church broadcast, which is happening soon. So you may want to check that out, and that's the website for it, and you can go to YouTube and check it out there. What I want to do today is highlight a few things from our forensic faith content that we're working through in our cell groups and help us make some connections to our Finding Truth series that we're doing every Saturday. And if you remember, if you're working through the forensic faith content in your cell, in the first session, and that's depending on hopefully your cell group is on point with the content and that you've worked through the first 3 sessions of forensic faith. In the first session is why do you believe? And in that first session, we explored reasons Christians give for why they believe. We saw that for most Christians, the reasons given for their faith fell into one of 4 categories. And the 4 are, generally speaking, broadly speaking, it's what they've always known, first category. Second, they had a personal encounter with God. Third, they went through a transformation in their character that they credited to God. And fourth was they just knew in their gut, in their heart, in their mind that there is a God and that the Bible is true. And Jim Wallace then highlighted for us that these 4 categories of reasons are also actually valid for those who are not Christian, like for example, like Mormons. And I'd suggest also like Hindus, or Buddhists, or Muslims, or most other believers of other belief systems, religions. I remember Tom Cruise at one point going hardcore converted Scientologist, and he's jumping up and down on Oprah Winfrey's couch in the middle of her stage during a show where she was interviewing him, and yeah, he really struggled to give anything other than the experience that he had found in following this new belief system, this new religion that he had found. So yeah, so you've got Jim Wallace's point is, these 4 broad categories of reasons are valid for not just Christianity, but for every other religion. And therein lies the problem with most Christians' reasons for being a Christian, because it's the same reasons that can be used by others who are not Christian to defend their faith. And if everyone can give the same reasons for their faith, then all faiths must therefore be the same and lead to the same destination. And that sounds a lot like a great rationale or justification for pluralism, which we talked about last time. So in that first session with Jim Wallace, he challenges us to go beyond our experience to answer the why we believe question, and to look to develop an evidentiary or forensic faith that is a faith based on evidence, not just experience. Because if you remember, experience can lead you to truth, but it can also lead you to error, whereas evidence can only lead you to truth, and it protects you from error. And so that was one of the big points he made in that first session, and that was not to discount the importance of experience, but that evidence should support that experience. So in the Finding Truth session, the first session, that's what we did. We essentially, I presented some compelling evidence for why you can believe that there is a God, and we worked our way through that evidence, and I hopefully was able to show you, and that you're able to be, if not convinced, at least have that thought planted in your mind, or the questions planted in your mind with regard to, is there a God? So that was what we did in that first session, and that you'll be able to think through that. All right, so in session 2 of Forensic Faith, that was about distinctive duty. We learned about the duty that we have as loyal believers, and I use that phrase very intentionally, loyal believers of Jesus the Christ and of Yahweh, or God the Father, as Jesus referred to him in the Gospels, to make a case for Christianity. So that's part of our duty, is to make a case for Christianity as loyal believers of Jesus the Christ and of Yahweh, God the Father. And Jim Wallace highlighted that even Jesus himself was a case maker. Jesus oftentimes said something akin to, if you don't believe me, then believe in the evidence. Like, for example, John the Baptist finds himself in prison, thanks to Herod, awesome guy, and he's got these doubts creeping into him, and he asks his disciples to go and see Jesus and just ask him straight up, are you the one that we're supposed to be waiting for? Are you the Messiah? Are you the Christ that we've been expecting? Or should we be looking for somebody else? And Jesus doesn't give a response, but continues to perform miracles in the presence of John the Baptist's followers. And then he turns to John the Baptist's followers and he says, go back and tell John what you saw. So there's this, Jesus doesn't give an argument per se. Instead, Jesus gives evidence to answer John the Baptist's query. So essentially then what we have is, we have in Jesus the very first in a very long line of Christian case makers. After Jesus, you had the original disciples of Jesus, those eyewitnesses to the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. Then you had the authors of the New Testament, or what they call the canon. And some of them were eyewitnesses of Jesus. Some of them were writing the account of an eyewitness of Jesus. And then, of course, some of the New Testament also is, well, a big bulk of it are letters. And a lot of those letters are from Paul, who had his own encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. And then you've got the early church fathers, disciples of the disciples of Jesus, and they wrote extensively about faith and about the church and about the nature of God, and even writing letters of defense and of argument to the civil leaders of their time, challenging their thinking around faith and around belief and around their view of Christianity and what Christianity could contribute, etc., etc. So you've got those guys, and then you've got people through the Middle Ages who are case makers, and even into the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century, in which we find ourselves in at the moment. And you've got people like Martin Luther, you had John Wesley, you had George Whitefield, you had one of my favorites, C.S. Lewis, you had G.K. Chesterton, and one of my all-time favorite case makers, who is now Ravi Zacharias, who died just this week, and much love and prayer go out to Ravi Zacharias' family. He's an awesome guy. I really appreciate how he would stretch and challenge my thinking, and the blessing that he was, simply because of how he would put together an argument and a case for Christianity, and in response to the challenges and the questions that people would ask, all really valid, really good questions. And he gave some fantastic responses that really challenged me, because don't think the way he thought. So I really appreciate him stretching me in that space and helping me to think differently. So yeah, rest in peace, Ravi. And then of course you've got the Christians of today, which we find ourselves. That's our slot and our time. And so in that session of forensic faith, I talked about our duty being twofold, and it's on that basis of the LA police who've got that line that they have to protect and to serve, something some of our politicians and police haven't been doing much of during this con virus. Anyway, that's for another day, and we can come back to that later. All right, so yeah, so as Christians, if Jim says we are to serve, we're called to serve others. We're called to serve God. We're called to serve others, but we do it with love, with tender hearts and humble minds. And there's a reference there to 1 Peter 3:8, and then later on in that same letter, in the same chapter, you've got Peter talking about how we need to protect the truth by being prepared to make a defense for the truth. And by the way, making a defense includes examining the evidence and the truthfulness of the evidence. And that also includes, part of this whole protecting, includes helping the next generation, our children and our children's children, know the evidence for Christianity. And so you've got the big idea in this session, as far as I was in terms of my takeaway from this session of forensic faith, was that we need to have a forensic faith. And a forensic faith is a faith that is believing in something because of the evidence, rather than an unreasonable faith which is a faith that believes in something in spite of the evidence, and despite the evidence being to the contrary. And I would put atheists in that category, or even a blind faith. And a blind faith is something believing in something without any evidence whatsoever. And that's the category that a lot of people of faith get lumped into. They get lumped into that category. Well, there's no faith, there's no evidence for your faith. And hopefully over the last few weeks, on a Saturday and in cell group during our forensic faith content and series, you've hopefully been able to discover that there is plenty of evidence for the existence of God. And we haven't yet touched on the evidence of the truthfulness of Christianity, and we'll journey through that as we explore the major religions of the world. So in the Finding Truth series, in our third session of Finding Truth, we looked at the theory of relativism, in other words, of subjective truth, and we compared it with objective truth. And we came to the conclusion in that session that truth is knowable, and therefore the premise or the assertion that God can be known has to be true. All right. So hopefully you're tracking so far on my little summary of and review of these two series, these two sets of content that we've been walking through as a church family, and for those who've been following on YouTube or plugging into Cell online. Okay, so hopefully that's as clear as mud for you. All right, so in the third session of Forensic Faith, he talked about targeted training, and we were encouraged, we were even dared to stop teaching and to start training. And teaching is how we learn, but training is how we prepare. And the question becomes, well, what are we preparing for? Well, we prepare to respond to people's challenges and questions to the Christian faith. And the big idea in this session is that we need to stretch and grow ourselves by intentionally booking in time in our schedules, our busy lives of Netflix and Stan and Disney Plus, kidding, booking in time to read and watch content that's going to challenge us and inform us, and then find ways to practice and apply what we've been learning by doing things like putting in our calendar a date into the near future where we want to be chatting with our unbelieving friends, our atheistic friends, our agnostic friends, around a case, our own evidence for what we believe in, presenting them with a case for our faith. So that was a big thing that came out of that targeted training session. And so, yeah, in the Finding Truth number 2, session number 2, I walked you through some key arguments against the assertion that God exists, so that hopefully you could see how some atheists think and argue against the existence of a God, argue against theism. And so the idea was to help you think through the logic of their argument, and hopefully that would prepare you by helping you to think the way that they think, and then so be able to articulate questions and responses to the arguments when they come up in your conversations, which I think is really important. And even session 3 in Finding Truth, we walk through the logic of relativism and pluralism, etc. All right, so like I said to you at the beginning, this is going to be a really brief video, and essentially we're done. And I'm hoping that I've been able to, at the very least, help you connect the content between forensic faith and finding truth. And listen, I want to land here and just say this to you. Can I encourage you and even implore you with the statement that it is time to prepare yourself to respond, to question, to even challenge the popular narrative in our world today that there is no God. And what's very much linked to that narrative is this narrative that Christianity, above all other religions, needs to be eradicated from the historical and contemporary and cultural landscape and memory of our society. Christianity is blamed for the ailments and the ills of society, and secularism is held up as the way out, the vaccine, the cure to Christianity. And my biggest problem with that whole narrative is this: if, and it's a big if Christianity is true, and I say it's a big if because I still want to journey through the Finding Truth series and help you reach the conclusion where you can see the truth of Christianity, and that you would also discover that in the Forensic Faith series as well. So back to my statement: if Christianity is true, then millions, perhaps billions of people will miss out on eternal life, will miss out on a better life in a better world, a restored world, because they've chosen to believe a lie based on shoddy logic, shoddy argument, and shoddy evidence. And essentially, family, someone needs to fight for these people's salvation. And who in your circle of friends, of family, of work colleagues, of your neighborhood, of your sports team, of in your learning space, in terms of the classroom, who in that space that you hold with high regard, that you love, that you're concerned about, that you like, who doesn't believe? Someone needs to stand up for that person, for that James and Amelia, and fight for their salvation. And I'm really hoping that it is going to be you and that it will be me. So I want to leave you with that, and I want to say to you, encourage you to really deep dive into the content. Go back and go back and work through the content and Finding Truth. Look at the videos again. Really think through the logic around them, and go back and review your Forensic Faith Participant Guide. Read the book, the Forensic Faith book, and start to make notes and start booking in time and start getting your training happening. Start stretching your faith, start gathering evidence and gathering an understanding and developing your case so that you are able to, fight for people's salvation. So blessings to you. Have a great day. Have a great week. Check out We Are the Church, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place, same person. Not person, same human being. As we continue our Finding Truth series. So blessings to you. Ciao.